Okay, you should already have in your notes something about the definitions of anatomy and physiology. You should also have in your notes something about how the structures of the human body are arranged in a hierarchy from least complex to most complex, from smallest to largest. And we also talked about some of the requirements for life, including survival needs and some of the essential life functions. What we're going to talk about right now is how the human body maintains a stable or set point. In the early 20th century, a famous scientist coined the term homeostasis. You've probably heard that term before. Homeostasis. And homeostasis actually exactly means same state. We want to maintain many things in the body at the same state regardless of what's happening outside the body. So if the internal environment is changing, we don't want that to happen. There are many things that we want to maintain at some sort of set point, even though the outside environment might be changing a lot. The most common example of this would be something like body temperature. We're going to look a little more closely at this by looking at a picture that's in your study guide. So if you turn to a page that looks something like this will help you understand what it is that we are going to be doing here with this homeostasis. This is a control mechanism. Control mechanisms help us maintain a steady state or a narrow band or limit of many things, including things like body temperature, blood pH, calcium, osmotic or water balance, sodium balance, blood pressure, glucose. Almost everything in your body is regulated to some degree, and it's usually the nervous system or the endocrine system that's involved in this process. Regardless, a control system or a control mechanism has to have some major parts. There are three major parts to a control mechanism. There has to be a receptor, there needs to be a control center, and there needs to be some sort of effector. This picture shows us actually something that is being kept at a steady state or at a constant level. In this example, body temperature is what's being maintained at a steady state. So you can see that there's a teeter-totter in the center there at a balance point, and the balance point is the homeostatic level. In this example, the homeostatic level would be 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on where you take the body temperature. You can see in this picture that the teeter-totter is changing, and that indicates that we are actually out of homeostasis. Something is happening. There's some sort of stimulus. In this particular case, the stimulus is that the body temperature is rising. That stimulus is picked up by a receptor. There would be nerve endings in various parts of your body that would be picking up information about body temperature. It would send that to the control center. Now the control center can change, but usually it can be the brain or some sort of endocrine gland. In this example, it's going to be the hypothalamus. That information is carried along nerve endings, in this example, along what's known as the afferent pathway. We'll talk more about that later as the year progresses. The control center decides, based on the stimulus that the receptor is feeding, decides how to respond to that. In this particular example, it's going to send information down another nerve pathway called the efferent pathway to what's known as an effector. The effector is always a gland of some kind or a muscle. In this example, it's going to be a sweat gland, and so the effector is going to be a sweat gland. The sweat glands will start releasing sweat onto the surface of the skin, and the evaporative cooling will lower body temperature, bringing us back to our set point, which is what we were trying to maintain. Now, the exact opposite can happen. The body temperature could drop. So the stimulus in this particular example could be that the body temperature is dropping. It's dropping below the set point of 37 degrees Celsius. In that case, the stimulus again is going to be picked up by a receptor. That receptor is still going to send information along the afferent pathway to the control center. The control center, again in this example would be the hypothalamus, is going to send this time along the efferent pathway a message to different effectors. Instead of a gland this time, it's going to be a muscle. And as you can see from the picture there, the gentleman is shivering. So the effector in this case would be skeletal muscles, and as those muscles move back and forth generating heat, it warms the body back up to the set point. So the set point needs to be 37 degrees Celsius. You can see that at any given time our body temperature may rise or fall, but through this control mechanism it's going to be maintained at what we'll call a set point, at a homeostatic level. It's not always 37 degrees, it goes up and down, so it oscillates around that set point using this control mechanism. Now this specific control mechanism is called negative feedback. And negative feedback is an excellent mechanism to help us maintain some sort of set point. A different example might be glucose levels, blood glucose levels. Those do need to be maintained at a very precise level. If your blood glucose levels rise, there's going to be a stimulus, in this case, rising blood glucose levels. The receptor would be special cells inside the pancreas. Those special receptor cells inside the pancreas are going to act as the control center, releasing a hormone called insulin, which is going to cause body cells, the liver and muscle cells to uptake glucose, lowering the blood glucose levels. Conversely, if the blood glucose levels were to drop, there are other cells in the pancreas that can monitor this, and they can release a hormone called glucagon, which can reverse that process, bringing you back to a stable state. That is also an example of negative feedback. Now, there is a different type of feedback mechanism known as positive feedback. Positive feedback does not maintain a set point. It always enhances the original stimulus and increases the actual stimulus, taking us further away from a set point. You'll find examples of this in the textbook, including blood clotting, the immune system, and the classic example, which is birth. In the birth example, as the head of the baby pushes on the cervix of the mom prior to birth, that creates pressure. That pressure is picked up by receptors in the cervix and sent along an afferent pathway to a control center, in this case the brain, and part of the brain, the hypothalamus and the pituitary. The hypothalamus-pituitary combination responds by releasing into the blood a hormone called oxytocin, which travels through the blood down to an effector. In this example, it's not a gland, it's going to be a muscle, and the muscle in this case is smooth muscle in the uterine walls, causing it to contract. The contraction causes the baby's head to push harder on the cervix. Now remember, the original stimulus was pressure, and in this example, what has happened is we've increased the pressure. We have taken it further away from the set point, and that is an example of positive feedback. That loop will continue until the baby is born. Positive feedback mechanisms always enhance the original stimulus, taking you further away. Your book uses the word cascade. It travels down like a waterfall. It continues down, or in this example that I gave you, up. But it always enhances the original stimulus. So that should take care of homeostasis. Hopefully this little discussion helped. If it didn't, don't hesitate to come in for after school or before school for some help. See you later.